Thank you very much. Just before we get started, there are some bingo cards scattered around the room. If you don't have one on your seat, I do think there will be enough for everyone in here. Grab it, and if you are the first to make 4 in a row, stick your hand up, make an excited shout, and then come talk to us afterwards. You'll win a prize. It might be good. It might not be.
Cool. Thank you, Victoria. So I think we're in the slightly tricky slot between you and lunch, which is a difficult one, but we've decided that if Victoria here is still pregnant by the time we finish the talk and hasn't had a baby, then we're going to take that as a success. And I'm hoping you're going to forgive me for installing some pre-lunch energy and asking you all to, if you're able, stand up. If you're not able, just put your hand up. That's fine. Thank you. This will be quick, don't worry. Okay, so can you please sit down if the company you're in has less than 1,000 people in it? And less than 10,000 people? Less than 100,000 people? And I haven't got to ask my last question because everybody sat down. So I think what I've learned, being one of 104-ish thousand people who work for BT globally, is that transformation in a company of that size, scale, age, is really, really hard. So I've been myself in transformation roles for the last around about 5 years in BT Group. Most recently, I have started a team that looks after capacity management and ways of working for digital at BT. My team fondly refer to it as Capacity Wow with the jazz hands. And, 5 years in transformation at BT, why haven't I transformed it yet? It is really, really difficult. And I've seen change fail at BT before. That was going to be my last question, by the way. So if anybody was still standing that hadn't seen change fail at their company of over 100,000 people, I was going to ask you to come up and do this talk instead of me. So we've made change that was the right change in the wrong way. We've put OD change in place where we haven't actually then made it real for the teams, considered how the work will flow. We've also made the right change in the right way, and it's failed because we've tried to go too fast. We got very excited, everybody got FOMO, everybody jumped on the train, and we tried to run before we could walk, and they all got off at the next stop. And it collapsed under its own weight. So I've seen it not work. What I have seen work is, irregardless of when you sat down, however big the company is that you work in, you have to start with a team. So even in a company of 104,000+ people, looking at transforming the way that we do delivery, the way that we do ways of working, if you can't get stuff working for a team of 8 people trying to get delivery done, then as soon as you scale out, your whole transformation is built on sand. And so that's where we wanted to do something differently this time. So just to give a little bit of, I'm getting used to the mic. Just to give a little bit of context then. Digital at BT was mobilised in 2021, so it's been around for 3.5 years now. And when we started out by trying to look at the foundations and get those in place. So we insourced over 1,000 roles in delivery, and particularly in engineering. We started closing off our legacy systems. We put a campus in place, an online training tool with lots of links to industry training to help continuously develop our people. And we thought, wow, aren't we doing great? And then we looked around, and actually there was still a lot of areas of delivery where people were telling us it was really hard to get things done, and where the delivery pace was off. We knew we needed to do something different. So last year, we wanted to look at our ways of working and accelerate our cultural transformation. And so we brought in some friends, Public Digital and Armakuni. So the people, if you're not familiar with them, who founded Public Digital were behind the government digital transformation. And I'm willing to bet that a majority, perhaps, of people in this room have had some form of interaction with gov.uk. Yeah, seeing nodding. So these guys are specialists in looking at pre-internet era large companies and transforming delivery, improving delivery where that change has failed before. So we wanted to draft in that help, and we needed it to look different this time. So we started out with some values that we would apply to how we did the work. So a few things that we wanted to do differently were to really, truly understand what the reality was in teams first, really deeply get into that, what is actually holding people back day to day, what's blocking them from getting things done. Avoid that myth of publishing equals adoption. we found we had, I think, around 1 million SharePoint pages telling people how to do things. So just writing down how it should work does not mean it then works that way. So we needed to actually go make it real in Teams. And we wanted to be completely transparent. I think it's sometimes in very large companies, you get this kind of cautious culture of making sure things look polished and finished before you share them. We wanted to share completely openly, as we went along, all of the messy reality of what was working, what wasn't working, and just take them along with us. So I'm going to let Victoria let you know how we started.
Thank you. So we started here. Hopefully this next section will give you some ideas on where you can apply some of these techniques too. These are the steps that we find help set us up for success at the start of an engagement. So first, we need to understand who's involved in the change: the core team, the supporters, the collaborators. And for this, we use Emily Webber's Team Onion template. It's really useful if anyone wants to try something like this. The core team needs to be multidisciplinary with the skills and, really importantly, the time to achieve the goal of what that team is set out to do. Collaborators bring in specialist skills and reduce blockers, and supporters ensure alignment with your organisation's goals. Can anyone tell me what these numbers are? Perfect. Yes, this is Dunbar's numbers. So roughly the size of each of those core collaborators, supporters needs to align with Dunbar's numbers. And you need to make sure you've got named individuals in these sections, not just placeholder roles. We then focused on creating psychological safety in the core team and beyond. Psychological safety is crucial for change. It's tough to nurture in siloed and complex organisations, though. So one exercise that we use is this simple sabotage, where we talk about techniques that actual American undercover agents were taught to go and sabotage places they were trying to stop things functioning in. So some techniques in this field manual were things like delaying deliveries until things are completely done rather than delivering incrementally, making sure 3 people have to approve everything when 1 would do, holding unnecessary meetings, and making sure all decisions have to go through a committee of no less than 5 people. It's surprising how many of these sabotage techniques are actually built into procedures in large organisations. Can I get a show of hands for anyone who recognises any of those things I just mentioned as being part of your process? Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? So we go through this list and then we add to it, and we use that to create a reference point to call out sometimes very cultural behaviours that are sabotaging the change we're trying to make in an organisation in a safe way. We also lived our principle of transparency. So through the Show the Thing sessions we had fortnightly, we saw engagement go up from people who weren't in the core delivery team. So this was people in the team sharing the effect of what working with us had been. And it just shows the positive engagement increasing when that happens more over the course of the engagement. So then finally, to drive sustainable change, we mapped out the whole digital landscape from both the top down and the bottom up. I was very proud of this slide, actually. If I could get a few more chuckles, that'd be great. We did things like interviews, value stream mappings, and really importantly, engineering level insights. So we actually spent time with the engineers, and these are people who often feel really disconnected from change happening in organisations. Stuff happens to them rather than with them, and their experience is actually super key to understanding what the real blockers are of an organisation. This is just an example of some of the things that we look at. Happy to talk more about all those things if anyone's interested. And then we boiled all of this down into some key observations.
Great. So what did we find? We found actually some areas that were delivering brilliantly and delivering exactly how we expected them to be delivering, and this kind of shining example of what we wanted to happen. But that brilliance was not evenly spread. So the images are going to get no less tenuous through this talk, I'll warn you now. We're not graphic designers. But essentially what we needed in our culture was actually that organic sharing to just be part of our DNA, for people to take that good practice and tell their peers, tell their colleagues, and that wasn't happening. So we saw brilliance, and then we saw pain in other areas, and we needed to do something about that. One of the other things that we found was a really human problem, actually, particularly in a company of 104,000 people, as you might imagine. There was a gap between, in particular for us, the people who plan and the people who do. And that was manifesting in a few different ways downstream that was creating pain for teams. So, for example, we were planning. We were planning things in too much detail, and we were planning them earlier than we needed to, and that was creating wasted time, wasted effort. Also, the people who plan and the people who do were not talking and working together to collaborate, prioritising. There we go, went off for a moment there. Weren't collaborating on prioritising day-to-day dynamically. So the teams, or some of the teams, ended up with high work in progress and high cognitive load, too much on their plate. That high cognitive load was also clogging the system, preventing our fast flow, bingo cards at the ready, and it was not giving people the space that they needed to actually learn new skills, improve what they were delivering, and improve how they were delivering. And all of that was exacerbated by this wrap of interdependencies that we have in BT, because we have a lot of teams, complex architecture, complex product catalogue, and some of those things were manifesting as bottlenecks because the teams didn't have time to figure out how to work more effectively together. So lots of issues, but actually what we found was that by looking directly at the front line and working with the teams, it told us about opportunities to improve things there, but it also told us about what needed to change in our systems right across BT. But we needed to avoid boiling the ocean, so we started actually making things better for the teams we were working with.
So what do we do in the teams we were working with? A huge part of successfully changing an organisation is coaching people to change themselves, not trying to do it for them. Or delivering a PowerPoint presentation with some lovely, neat diagrams and assuming that that means it's done and everyone's going to do what they say. So our approach...
We don't do those kind of PowerPoint presentations, as you might tell.
We don't, no. So our approach focused on empowering, bingo, teams from the ground up. First, start with the why. That's the face I was looking for. The engineers are the powerhouse of your organisation. They're the people who create what you sell, what you do, the service you have. So start with a proper kick-off with them. Introduce the programme fully. Explain why this approach is different. This isn't just another set of consultants coming in, telling them what to do, leaving with a PowerPoint presentation. And the first indicator of that is that you're actually engaging with them straight away. Next, ensure that you're always working alongside someone in the organisation through pairing, mobbing, ensemble work, whatever it is, do with, not to. While there is often, always, initial resistance to this, you need to start with the low-hanging fruit, listen to people's blockers, celebrate them, celebrate the small wins you get by solving them, and this will help build trust. And these are some of the quotes we had from working with BT engineers. Soon people will want to work with you. They won't to start with. They will feel like you're marking their homework or they're being tested for something, but it's really key to spend that time and build that trust. So I want to share 3 key experiments that we did in the teams. First of all, we looked at improving predictability. So as Sarah mentioned, teams were suffering from being overloaded with too much stuff to do, which hurt delivery timelines when unplanned work came in, as it always does. So by encouraging more realistic planning and giving teams the tools to push stories back to the backlog, we empowered them to confidently say no when it was necessary. And this meant that we improved predictability in the teams by 50%, sometimes 100% in some places, reducing the cost of delay and the negative impact on other teams that were dependent on them delivering on time. Next experiment was around time efficiency. So this particularly focused on where there were APIs which were crossing team boundaries, and they often required multiple meetings for alignment. We introduced open API specifications, which were agreed asynchronously and eliminated many meetings. So the squads were able to shift left, moving from costly collaboration to things as a service. This was a technical change, but it was also very cultural. In an organisation where quite a lot of the time people are triple booked for meetings, reducing the need for them is a big deal. And we saved around 12 person hours per team sprint, freeing that time up for other things. Third experiment I want to talk about is quality. So the squads rely on manual testing from separate QA teams, and engineers were only testing happy paths where they were testing at all. So we helped them implement better developer tests, focusing on those edge cases, and adopting techniques like test-driven development and mutation testing. And this reduced feedback time for failures from sometimes days, weeks, to minutes, and reduced the blocking dependency on the QA teams. And that saved about 4 hours per sprint per developer. So in this totally made up organisation, I just wanted to do this as a worked example because some of those things feel really small, like not turning up to as many meetings doesn't seem very impactful, but when you multiply it up, it gets big. So in this example, we've got a 5,000 strong digital workforce. If they're saving 12 hours a sprint a team, and I made up £25 an hour, it could be more, it could be slightly less, and then there are 24 sprints in a year, say there are 300 teams, that is a lot of money. Similarly, with shorter testing feedback loops, 4 hours a sprint, £25 an hour, 24 sprints, that's going to affect more engineers. That is also a lot of money. So making these small changes can make a huge impact on your bottom line. But that is just the bottom up. So Sarah, if you want to talk about top down.
So we also needed to change the weather. Ta-da. So we were working with the teams day to day, but we also need to tackle those systemic enablers that we'd found across BT, which is a bigger problem to solve. And really crucially, what we wanted to do was inject more kind of trust and space in our culture. We had, in many areas, kind of a tight grip of governance that was actually constraining the flow of value and slowing things down. And then we weren't making that space, that time for people to plan effectively, deliver predictably, upskill, improve their ways of working. So how could we install that in our systems, in our DNA of how BT operates? So we did a few things. I'll give you an example that I think is quite a nice one because we solved this one relatively quickly. Prior to this piece of work, so back beginning of last year, we were measuring productivity on an individual basis in delivery. When we went into the teams to do the work that Victoria was just talking about, we took the targets away from the people we were working with, and we very explicitly told them we were doing that. We said, you're not being targeted on your productivity for the next couple of months because we want you to have the time, feel like you can turn around, work with us, and learn new skills, learn new ways of working. And I love this cartoon, I trot it out all the time. Because we then anticipated there would be a dip in productivity, and that was fine. We expected that, we wanted that because we wanted to give them that space to slow down, to then move faster. And imagine our surprise when we then looked at the data 6 weeks later, and the productivity had gone up by 23% in that team compared to their productivity before we'd started working with them and compared to the teams around them, which is quite stunning. So then we had a proof point, which was helpful. So we used that to go and contract with the whole of the BT group that the way we measure productivity as a business needs to change. And now we're not going to be measuring individuals anymore. We're zooming out to value stream level. We're looking at team-based metrics. We're looking at a more holistic scorecard of metrics, including things like developer experience, where we'll get a score, kind of like a maturity score of how our ways of working are landing, but also that qualitative data that tells us whether we're actually making a difference, whether the productivity is real and it's not like a watermelon, and it will help us to prioritise interventions moving forwards. So that was one way that we increased trust in our system, but we also... repetition as well. We also needed to come back to closing that gap. So bringing plan and do closer together. And here we in the areas we were working with, we went and spoke to the leaders, particularly in the customer-facing units that the delivery teams were delivering to, contracted with them that they would ring-fence 20% of their time to work with the teams that were delivering the outcomes that they needed. We also refreshed governance so that it was focused on collaborative, dynamic prioritisation and actually stopping stuff as well, holding to those work in progress limits. And we did things like put in place laddered governance so that at each level, teams were clear on what they could make a decision on. Because it's really easy to say, empower yourselves, feel empowered. We hear it all the time. Our leaders say it, you should all feel empowered. It's a nice thing to be told, but what does actual empowerment look like? It's knowing what you own, what you can do without having to ask anybody else. And so we needed to make that really clear and explicit. So that's some of the things that we did from a governance perspective.
Sorry.
Oh, did I go? Oh, back, sorry. So, so another nice tagline that I like from this piece of work is transformation happens at the speed of trust. And we really wanted to get that message clear on how, coming back to the self-sabotage exercise, sometimes our leadership teams can put more governance and control in place and feel more comfortable about it, but actually what they've done is slow things down, and we needed to inject more trust into the system. So we went and roadshowed our way around the leadership teams in BT Group across all the different lines of business, and we told them stories about what was actually happening in engineering, in delivery, what the reality was, and we closed that truth gap. And we also explained what behaviours we needed to see from them as leaders to actually lead and support modern delivery teams, and gave them concrete examples and anti-patterns, things that we didn't want to see. So that led us to a place where we effectively had evidence. We had our 23% productivity improvement. We've been delivering solutions for customers faster in the areas we've been working in. We also had momentum. So coming back to our working in the open policy, we'd started a weekly newsletter and also a fortnightly demo session. We invited everybody to, so we would show how work was going, how things were coming along. We had between 400 and 1,200 people join us on that session every time, and we just created a bit of a movement, a lot of positivity for the work that we were doing, which then gave us permission to go further. So now we're in a place where we have aligned BT around the change that's needed, and we have an interlocked programme of work now that is putting in place funded, stable, cross-functional teams that are planning to their capacity and value with a persistent mission. So that is now what's being put in place. We are simplifying our governance. We are setting up services to continue to run those weekly newsletter sessions, the demo sessions, codify the work and set up a service so that we can constantly see what the best way of working is that's actually happening in practice at BT. And put that organic sharing in our DNA. So, to summarise, most of you in smaller companies, but if you ever find yourself trying to make change in a very large pre-internet era company, these are our tips. So, listen first, go deep, understand the reality, actually go into teams and find out what's working. Start in the team, make the change real somewhere. Don't just apply a framework, don't just publish and expect it to be adopted. Go and make the change with people, find what works actually in your company. Close the gap, so give your teams a voice. Explain to leadership kind of how things actually work in practice, they're too far away. And bring plan and do together. Change the weather, so evolve your systems, increase trust, increase space for your teams so that they are set up for success and they can continually improve. And install feedback loops. Work in the open, be brave, be bold, don't be frightened to share things that are half-formed or that you know are messy or that you know aren't great. Share the things that have succeeded and the things that have failed. Codify what is working and set that up as a long-lived service with a team behind it. And then go bigger, but scale out at a sustainable pace, value stream by value stream. So if it was easy, we wouldn't all be here today probably talking about this stuff. It is hard, but it doesn't necessarily have to be complicated. And that is what we wanted to cover today. I think Victoria is still pregnant, so that's excellent news. I think we have got a little bit of time for questions, if anybody has some. Not a lot of time, though. 5 minutes?
Oh, we've got one over here.
Hi. Did you face any sort of politics, especially when you're trying to sort of the gap in particular?
Yes, next question.
Good, great. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I think, I would like to think that any company the size and scale of BT is going to be facing politics. Politics is a thing that you have to manage with change. We did. I think that the approach we took of that layered approach of having evidence by actually showing it working on a very small scale so that you then get permission to go bigger is important, because a company like BT is very data-led. Like if you go to the Exco, they want to see proof points, not just concepts. So that was important. And then demonstrating the level of desire and momentum behind this. So having that, hundreds of people turn up every 2 weeks to hear about what was happening, and the excitement and the positivity about how this is going to alleviate the pain that people were hearing about in our kind of regular company colleague survey every 6 months. That was also important. And then I think, it was a little bit kind of nudge theory, just trying to roll the snowball down the hill of explaining what the behaviour change needed to be. And it did take some nudging. I think we were probably just like walking behind the ball, kicking it for a while. It took us probably about 4 months to really start seeing it hurtle on down. And now I feel like I'm in a place where, having been in BT for 8 years altogether, in change roles for 5 years, this is the first time that the company feels like everybody is pulling in the same direction. Total alignment. It's still a challenging job to do, but I feel like this is the first time we've had a real opportunity to get it done. Yeah.
It's also important to understand where that politicking is coming from, because quite often it's from misaligned incentives. So if you have someone over here with an incentive to do X and someone over here with an incentive to do Y, and they're not compatible, there's going to be friction there. So what are the organisational incentives? What are the ones you want to prioritise, and how do you cascade that down to people so that actually you can reduce as much of that politicking that's being driven by the organisational piece as possible? That was awkward.
Good question. Thank you.
Awkward. Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. You talked about value, but we're going through kind of some exercises of fidelity around complexity and value.
About what in value, sorry?
Complexity and value when you're doing planning. So just interested to know how you measured value, because it's not that straightforward. So just interested to know your thoughts on that.
Another excellent question. Thank you. I think it's something that we're still working on cracking. So with the programme that's now in place, that is, installing these funded, stable teams, that work is also going, okay, let's get completely aligned on actually what is the outcome that's needed from this team. What does the mission need to be? And then the governance that we're then putting in place around that will look on a quarterly basis, but within the team it will happen day to day at those particular key measures that everybody's aligned around. And I think for me that's the key thing, is that we have had teams in place with OKRs and all the rest of it before, but we didn't look at the measures enough. We didn't focus on the value over the sort of cost and budget enough. And the alignment wasn't there, and that was the most crucial part, that cascade of the whole strategy, so everybody understands how they fit in, what their why is, their mission and purpose, and that it's truly aligned with all of their customer groups. It's not an easy one to crack, particularly again in a company the size and scale of BT and with all the things that we're trying to do. But I think getting that infrastructure right first is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you can put people running in a direction even faster, even brilliant, but they might be running in different directions, and that's something we're trying to solve now. Anything you'd add to that, Victoria?
Just that it's very hard to judge value if people are working on a really thin slice of a thing and they can't see how it connects to the whole. So having that the cascade down to the multidisciplinary teams working on the value stream is going to be key to making that happen. Are you showing us a piece of paper?
Did anyone win bingo?
Did anyone cross off any of the words on their bingo cards? Too busy listening to our fascinating story. Great, I'll take that as a win. Lunch is there. Yes, we better not get in the way of that.
Lunch, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening.